Namaste and greetings. I, Tripta Behra, researcher at IMPRI, Impact in Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Learning. We are gathered today for day 3 of YWLPPF, the Young Women Leaders in Public Policy Fellowship, an online national winter school program, a 2-month online immersive introductory leadership certificate training program organized by IMPRI, Gender Impact Study Center, GISC. The chair for this program is Professor Vibhuti Patel, visiting distinguished professor, IMPRI, and the expert for today's session is Professor Roxana Marinescu, Professor, Faculty of International Business and Economics, Department of Modern Languages and Business Communication, Bucharest University of Economic Studies, Romania, also visiting Professor IMPRI. The conveners for this course are Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Simi Mehta, Professor Gummadi Sridevi, and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam. I welcome all the participants to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for being interested and putting your time, energy, and efforts into fostering the development of young women leaders in public policy and helping us to bring together the practitioners and participants through this course for impactful policy research and action. We have shared the course outline and reading resources in your email for your kind courtesy. Before we start today's session, I would like to remind the housekeeping announcements once again. Kindly join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Kindly share your questions in the Q&A box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Kindly ensure that your questions are precise and refrain from making any general comments in order to save time. Now, without further ado, let us start the program. I would like to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel to give her opening remarks and begin for today. Ma'am, if you could please take it from here, over to you.
Yeah. So thank you, Tripta Behra, for this introduction. And I would like to, first of all, welcome Professor Roxana Marinescu for today's session. And this welcome all esteemed participants to this online National Winter School program. First of all, let me offer my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Simi Mehta, Dr. Shalu Nigam, Dr. Tripta Behra for for the whole course, the hard work that has gone behind that. And now we are going to discuss the whole perspective about the gender equality, which has traversed from welfare perspective to the current one of empowerment. Constitution of India, constitution of most of the progressive countries guarantees women equality in all areas of life, absence of discrimination on the basis of sex as a fundamental right. And it also enters the state with the responsibility of realizing this equality by adopting various measures, including positive discrimination in favor of women. Beginning with the welfare perspective, the thrust shifted to development of women by mid-70s and 74, 75, the status of women's committee reports were presented by all member countries of the United Nations. And 1975 was declared as the International Women's Year. The International Women's Conferences in Mexico, Copenhagen, Nairobi, and Beijing during 1975 to 95, those 20 years, were other international events that gave an increasingly radical thrust to women's problems and also provided vision on a gender in the state and the national policies. It was at Beijing that platform for action to realize women's equality was announced, and this, along with international convention ratified by several countries, Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which was adopted by UN in 1979, which influenced several national level policies among the member countries of the United Nations. In the meantime, so many nation states also formed the National Commission for Women, and it is in this context of this new awareness about women's question that we see the increasing interest on women's the policy and how it translates into legislation and action. That is a very important journey that we have had over last 7 decades. Now, this is day 2, but on day 1st, we had a very, very brilliant speech by the renowned activist and member of a trade union, Comrade Amarjit Kaur. She played important role for the formation of various national level organizations. And Dr. Amarjit Kaur talked about the whole gender parity in our society, that why we need gender parity, what kind of affirmative actions are required, and the role that civil society organizations, community-based organizations, they face. She also appealed to the participants that how we need to retain the humanitarian face in the midst of this identity-based polarization and the majoritarianism, which completely excludes the minorities from any progressive initiatives or for development. And she says this polarization based on caste, class, race, ethnicity, religion, moral policing, dress code, that needs to be countered collectively by at the grassroots level. At the same time, we need to have social policies and the legislations. That means both the judicial route and the legislative route need to be adopted to retain the kind of guarantees which the Constitution has given. Let us not be let us not be paternalistic or a complacent that this will automatically come. No, the current experiences of several countries shows that we need to safeguard the interest very proactively. And she also said that we need to be sensitive to intersectional marginalities and the vulnerabilities. And she gave several examples of child labor. She gave examples of how 20 crore migrant workers who are in our country, they are in informal sector, they have to suffer. So the larger perspective is very important to bring the transformative changes in our society. And now today, we have Professor Roxana Marinescu to enlighten us about how the geopolitics and the global women's movement and movement in the East European countries is taking shape. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vibhuti ma'am, for that lovely introduction. I would now like to invite Professor Roxana Marinescu to begin her session on feminism and global gender equality, challenges and progress. If you could please take it from here, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen and make sure that you have a full screen. Can you see it and can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, visible and loud and clear.
Oh, okay, excellent. Okay, so I prepared about a 30-minute presentation on feminism and global gender equality, and focusing mostly on the progress we have made so far in global feminism, but also some challenges ahead. And I divided this presentation into 3 parts. I was thinking that maybe it would be interesting to cover a bit of the theoretical trends that we have nowadays in contemporary feminism, rather than just give you figures and numbers and look at that, which is definitely important. But I was thinking that maybe a more theoretical framework would be interesting for you. And then I selected some issues with some of the challenges that are connected to them. And I just wanted to say that both the theoretical trends and the issues are just my personal input. So of course, definitely there are other trends and other issues. But I just wanted to mention these ones that I thought might be important and relevant for you as well. And then I will end with some solutions and way forward as I see it for the future of feminism. I want to start with this idea that we're now in the so-called 4th wave of feminism. I really don't know how familiar you are with this, maybe a bit of a Western categorization of the waves of feminism, starting with the first wave at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, when women had conducted their struggle mostly for equal rights, equal gender rights, very specifically representation rights, so voting rights, also economic rights, the right to own property, also social rights, the right for education and so on, up to the second wave, focusing on the differences between the binary men and women, and the more inclusive, more intersectional third wave, and now in a fourth wave. So the idea that of the fourth wave of feminism, in which some theorists believe we are in, being that feminism nowadays is more inclusive, not just the Eurocentric or Western-centric type, but including different types of feminism throughout the world, but all of them focusing on mainly justice for women and the online activism and online social media petitioning and so on. So this focus on the internet and the developments in science and technology. And a very important idea is that Kimberly Crenshaw came up with in the late 1980s, that of intersectionality, so the type of discrimination that is suffered by women, not just for being women, but also for different other reasons, such as socioeconomic group, that is class or caste, but also age, disability, race, and so on. And I just wanted to put this picture here, which is from the United States, the Women's March in Washington, D.C., which was women were called upon to do this march immediately after Donald Trump was elected president of the United States, and the mobilization was done online, and the turnout was really significant. And you can see women of, and not just women, but let's say people of different races and colors and different social groups joining. Of course, as I said earlier, the different other movements, feminist movements throughout the world are part of this fourth wave. And I just wanted to mention India here. And obviously, you know more about India perhaps than I do. I just named here some of the protests and some of the movements that happened with the English translation for myself, not for you. And of course, we see that the debated issues are general, such as gender inequality and sexual violence, but also very specific, maybe not just for India, but definitely more localized, child marriage, sex selective abortions, dowry-related violence, and so on. And the same for Latin America, which is another very important movement which influenced generally movements throughout the world, entitled Ni Una Menos, which means not another one, coming from a poem, a phrase by Mexican poet and activist Susana Chavez, Ni Una Muerta Más, not another dead woman. This movement started in Argentina in 2015, but also spread throughout Latin America and in Europe, in Spain and Italy. And it's a grassroots movement. That's very important, that it really started from ordinary women who fought what they call machismo in Spanish. That's toxic masculinity. And the protests are mostly against gender-based violence, more specifically femicide, so killings of women by members of their immediate family or boyfriends, husbands, and so on. But it also covers other topics, gender roles, sexual harassment, also some economic topics such as the gender pay gap, abortion, which is really, really big in South America. In Argentina specifically, they a few years ago, they voted for in favor of the legal abortions, and also transgender rights. And as opposed to this idea that we belong to the fourth wave of feminism, we have another idea covered by other types of theorists, that we live an era of post-feminism, which they write hyphenated or not. That's why I put it like this in my title, in which we see, especially from younger generations, we see a decline in the support for feminism, because especially younger people in the Western part of the world are very familiar now with feminism, and they consider that everything has been done, feminism has been reached, everything has been achieved, so we no longer need to do anything about it. Also, they feel that there is some sort of negative stigma which is felt by them if they consider themselves feminists, and therefore we need to move forward and forget about feminism. And we can see that in a lot of products of popular culture, such as chick lit. I'm not very sure you know the concept. That's the kind of literature, the novels written specifically for women in Western type literature, but also in popular culture movies and series, such as Bridget Jones's Diary, which is an English novel, a set of novels actually, several of them, and also movies. The series Sex and the City, or Ally McBeal, dealing with a lawyer. And they made Angela McRobbie, a professor of gender studies and feminism in England, write a book, The Aftermath of Feminism, Gender, Culture, and Social Change, in which she analyzed some of these products and talked about how these, especially younger women, use feminism to and the achievements of feminism to basically go back to femininity and to secure a man rather than be assertive and empowered and so on. So that's another trend in feminism. And now I want to move or talk about other types of feminisms, not just Western type feminisms. And the first one is Black feminism or womanism, which gets its name from Alice Walker, an African-American writer. I hope you're familiar with her work. Anyway, she wrote a volume in 1983, In Search of Our Mother's Garden, Womanist Prose, in which she talks about womanism and connects it to feminism, because a lot of people afterwards talked about womanism and whether it is feminism or not. And for Alice Walker, it is, because she says her famous phrase, womanism is to feminism as purple is to lavender. So basically coming from the same history and being very similar. And womanism deals with mostly the needs of Black women as opposed to white feminism. In fact, it's like some sort of critique of white feminism, as they consider that so far, up to the 1980s, feminism catered mostly to the needs of white women in the West. So they wanted to include besides gender inequality, they wanted to include issues of race and class oppression and issues of colonialism. Again, this kind of intersectionality that Kimberly Crenshaw talked about. Also very characteristic for womanism or Black feminism are two ideas. The fact that it centers on community rather than individuals, because we know that Western white feminism goes along with individualism. And the second issue is spirituality, which is religion, but not only religion, spirituality in a larger sense. And connected to womanism is Africana womanism. And I wanted to mention two writers here, Clenora Hudson Weems, who is African-American and who wrote this book, which gave the name of the movement Africana womanism in 1993. talking about how it is very important to look at the African heritage, the African roots of African American women, and also African women, and therefore look at their experiences and struggles and needs. And she also includes 18 features of the Africana woman, and you see them on the screen: a self-namer, self-definer, and so on. So they're all there at page 143 in the book. The second writer I wanted to mention is a Nigerian one, Chikwenye Okonjo-Ogunyemi, who wrote this book, which has in 1996, which has in the center the idea of trouble or palava. And she says that as this is characteristic for men and patriarchy, we need to move to a more feminist world or womanist world, to consensus, compromise, and cooperation. And that happens because Black leaders, together with white men, are part of the patriarchy. So they enhanced and exacerbated the problems of colonialism and post-colonialism. So therefore, women need to fight both of them, because they're both part of patriarchy. I want to move on to the colonial feminism, which is characteristic, the same as post-colonial feminism, with which they both of them have a lot of things in common. But decolonial feminism is specific to Latin America, whereas post-colonial feminism is more specific to the former colonial world, and especially India and the former British Empire, not just India, but there are a lot of Indian post-colonial feminists that you probably know about. So decolonial feminism, the same as in the same way as post-colonial feminists, critiques and challenges Western feminisms and what they call the coloniality of knowledge. So the idea of Western feminists that when they talk about woman, or they refer to universal women, and woman is a monolithic category. Decolonial feminists as well as post-colonial feminists say, no, in fact, there are all sorts of women in this world, and we cannot just put all of them in the same category. We need to look at differences among these categories. And they want to decolonize knowledge and power systems, because for them, the West and Western feminism has a hegemonic position, so a power position within this feminist framework. So they want to dismantle this. They want to get a more egalitarian position, and for all women, all categories of women throughout the world, because for them, this hegemonic position came from the way the Western feminists, the Western white feminists, placed third world women, so-called third world women, in opposition to them, like in the idea that Said had about Orientalism and the concept of the other, and created this gender binary, which of course didn't exist in the South American tribes, in India, and in Africa, and in other parts of the world. So the gender binary, the division between men and women, is just a Western creation for this decolonial feminists, and therefore they need to sort of go back, recover their historical memory, and honor their ancestral their ancestors and their ancestral wisdom, and go back to their roots. And there are different variants of this decolonial feminism, among which womanism, but also mujerismo from South America. And I just put on the screen in my PowerPoint two names, Maria Lugones and Gloria Anzaldúa, with their two very, very important books, The Decolonial Feminist, in which Maria Lugones talks about gender as a colonial imposition, and Borderlands or La Frontera, the New Mestiza, in which Gloria Anzaldúa talks about hybridity, in Spanish la mezcla, and borderlands. She specifically talks about the border between Mexico and the United States as in-between land, the third world land, where you're sort of not here nor there, you're in between. And post-colonial feminism, as I mentioned earlier, starts from the same critique of Western feminism and the universalism of the category woman, and looks at more intersectional oppressions. And also, they take into account more specifically the colonialism and what happened afterwards, therefore post-colonialism, but also the aftermath of colonialism in imperialism. So these ideas of how the ideas of former empires are still used and are still they still exist in those spaces in which women are regarded as a category which was created by Western, the Western perspective, the Western gaze. So they fight to incorporate indigenous women's experiences and the third world movement in the feminist movement. Some important representatives: Audre Lorde, an African-American feminist, Chandra Talpane Mohanty, obviously, and Spivak, who you perhaps heard of or studied in the university and in school. And I just very, very briefly want to mention post-communist feminism, because that's where I come from. And it's a relatively new movement, which started in 1989 in Central and Eastern Europe, after the fall of the communist regime here in this region. And it's very similar in a way to post-colonial and decolonial feminism. So it has more in common with them than with Western feminism, which is very interesting, I think. In the 1990s, post-communist feminists had the first contact with Western feminism after the dictatorial regimes which we had previously in this part of the world. And that Western feminism was specifically liberal feminism, which imposed their ideas and practices and institutions, and they didn't take into account the situation, the local situation of women. And in the period of what we call it, the transition to this democratic political system, but also to the liberal or neoliberal market economy, we encountered women, I mean feminists in this part of the world, encountered specific problems that dealt with mostly the weak representation of women, political and economic representation, also the backslide of reproductive rights. There's a whole movement of anti-abortion, reproductive rights of women, with the increase of populism and far rights movements that we can see here in this region. And again, I mentioned some feminists, important feminists from this region, from Hungary, Poland, and Romania. And there is, of course, transnational feminism, which is very topical nowadays, which takes into account, starts from globalization, the idea of globalization, and how globalization affected different women differently around the world. And they want to promote solidarity and collaboration among all of these women. There is, again, commitment to challenge injustice and oppression, for an increase in women's agency, all types of women, not just women as opposed to men, but trans women, femme, any type of woman that they include in this category, in some sort of solidarity networks and alliances that need to be equal. So we shouldn't have a hierarchy or a hegemony of any type of feminism. We just need equality according to transnational feminism. And as I said, we need to consider the experiences of all types of women, including immigrants, refugees, displaced persons, people who had to experience forced migration, and so on. looking mostly to this idea of trans-border and movements and due to globalization by practicing reflexivity and interdisciplinarity. And again, here we have Chandra Talpade-Mohanty with her book, Feminism Without Borders, Decolonizing Theory Practicing Solidarity, in which she talks about building, and I quote, a non-colonizing feminist solidarity across the borders. So of course, she's very much anti-capitalist and against neoliberalism. Okay, so after covering so far the theoretical background, I want to move on to some issues that feminism nowadays encounters, and I want to stop at gender mainstreaming, which is together with gender budgeting, but I don't want to deal with gender budgeting because I'm not an economist, so I don't know too much about it, but gender mainstreaming and gender budgeting are the issues that we've been told that we need to include in our public policies. And obviously, they're very important because they want to realize gender equality throughout the board, starting from the early phases of public policy development, from the preparation phase, going on to design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. And they want to, we want to make sure that all genders are represented, and that the interests of all types of women and men are equally addressed. So obviously, it's quite important to have gender mainstreaming in all the public policies. But there are also some challenges and critiques, and most of them come from the idea that sometimes in some situations, they are the approach is a superficial one, because gender mainstreaming is introduced in public policies at the request of usually international donors or institutions or governments, and is not really internalized in the documents and then in the implementation. So it stays on paper, it's not evaluated, it's usually a paragraph at the beginning of the policy or at the end of the policy. It's not internalized by those who need to implement them. There are sometimes some external factors intervening, such as the pandemic or wars, conflicts, and so on. And also, another critique comes from this idea of co-optation of people who are supposedly implementing the policies. And co-optation means the fact that usually the feminists or the NGOs or the people who implement these policies are sort of in between the international donors and their requests, them being the people who bring the money, who finance the policies, and the women and the people they represent and whose rights they need to support. So they're in between, and sometimes they're co-opted by those financial institutions. So we really need to pay attention to that as well. Another issue is gender representation, and I collected here some data from UN Women for last year, in which you can see that we're not doing so great globally in terms of executive representation or legislative representation. We're doing a little bit better in terms of local representation, globally speaking, with about a third of elected members of local deliberative bodies being women. So the idea is how to make representation meaningful. And of course, we have this model. That's those of you who studied or are studying political sciences perhaps are aware with, that Hannah Pitkin came up with in the 1960s, talking about 4 types of representation. So dealing only with the last 2, descriptive representation versus substantive representation, obviously we want more substantive representation. So not just the number of women, not just counting the women as I did here, collecting data about how many women, of course that's important as well, but making sure that these women represent us in a substantial way. So they do something to the interest of women. And there are some solutions for better representation, descriptive and otherwise. And one of these solutions are the system of quotas or reserved seats, as I think you have in India, which can be compulsory or voluntary. And of course, we have a lot of arguments for that, the democratic argument, that all citizens are equal, the economic argument, the efficiency argument, and so on, the diversity argument. The other very, very important issue is violence against women, which is throughout the world. Again, you have some data here, and also some types of violence against women, which were put together by the Council of Europe, but they apply globally, I think. And of course, they are characteristic for different societies, and along the years, maybe some of them existed in other ratios, but they still exist, I suppose, all over the world. Backlash and backsliding in the context of neoliberalism, I think, is another very important issue that we're dealing with. And as I said, the context is the neoliberal one, and therefore there is this emphasis on the market and on market forces, and also on individualism and competition and so on. And therefore we have this idea of business feminism or market feminism, or feminism as becoming the handmaiden of capitalism, or leaning in feminism, which you have on this screen. And also some types of feminism, tamer feminism, they try to make feminism into more acceptable versions, such as equality feminism or gay normality, as part of the mainstreaming process. So this is another, I think, important issue that we need to address. So in terms of solutions and way forward, the last part of my presentation, I just wanted to give the obvious solutions to have a more inclusive and diverse dialogue. But this dialogue should be based, I think, and not only me, because this is an idea that I took from Rosi Praidoti, the idea of the deterritorialization of knowledge. So the fact that we really need to look at different types of knowledges and ideas of feminism and different experiences of women, not just women, minoritarian subjects globally. We need to look at them globally, and then be able to listen to all these alternatives, modes of knowing and becoming, and voices, and try to transversally engage in dialogue with them. Another solution that I can see is around the idea of feminist care, taking this idea from Joan Tronto and her idea of feminist care and the ethics of care, because according to Joan Tronto, this would change the power balance. So again, historically excluded group would need to be brought into the decision-making spaces, and we would look at transnational solidarity in order to identify the common strategies and challenge the patriarchal systems. And that would be done by putting care in the center and changing the whole paradigm of care, care becoming a public good, and not as it is nowadays, especially in the West, a commodity or a personal choice or a family obligation. So we would need to take into consideration experiences of migrant women, women of color, all sorts of women. Okay, and the next one would be the creation of a safe and supportive transnational feminist space. And that would be, in my opinion, by engaging mostly with feminisms from the so-called second world, that is the post-communist feminist, so feminism in the eastern part of Europe, with the so-called third world feminists and feminism. Trying to transnationally create this solidarity and engaging in dialogue among ourselves. And the final idea, which I took from Mohanty from her book Feminism Without Borders, this idea of transnational solidarity. You have her quotation here, which I'm not going to read, but anyway, I think that's an important idea for us to take forward. And with this, I finish, and looking forward to questions, or perhaps we're moving on to Professor Patel's. I don't really know how we're going to deal with that, but I'm sure the organizers will tell us. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that lovely and insightful session. Vibhuti, ma'am, if you would like to give
Yeah.
it.
Thank you, Professor Roxana Marinescu, for such a huge canvas you have covered in such a short time, and all the trends over last 200 years of discourses in the feminist movement were encapsulated by you, and even the various types of economies. So it's a capitalist economy, conventional capitalist economy, neoliberal economy, post-communist economies, how women's predicament are determined by the macro forces, and also the kind of responses that the collective expression of women is given. Wide range of issues also you have covered, taken up by feminists, and starting from, say, the first equality perspective, then the gender binary perspective, more inclusive perspective, where going beyond gender binary we talked about, and now the fourth wave of feminism. So I think it's a very good setting, the important setting you have given, in which you can analyze any nation state's status, as well as the struggles of women over last two centuries. So I think that is very important. The way you ended also, it hope generates, because today's times are hopeless. No, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Palestine, it's so unnerving. Every day you get up in the morning, read the newspaper, you feel that there is the transformative change is not possible. But at the same time, when we interact at a ground level and get so many empowering testimonies, even those small stories have become so important in the women's work. So I think you ended with the optimistic perspective, which is very important, and your thinking about the care as a public good, extremely important takeaway we need to explore in our own context, and also come up with the affirmative action. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Perhaps we can take a few questions. Participants, in case you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box or raise your hands and unmute yourselves.
Yeah, I can unmute and speak also.
Shwetmaji, I hope I'm getting your name right. You can go ahead with your question.
Hi, good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, like, these days I can see in Bollywood or even in Hollywood, some movies are made that, that highly glorifies and justifies the use of violence against women or some traits of misogynistic characters. Okay, so that has, that has created a sort of galvanization or sort of movement among the feminists that has, that every woman would, would want to speak about it, or want to give opinions about it. So how do we take it, as how do we take it, and how shall we express our views? Obviously, like, I wouldn't agree with it, so how can I positively or in a positive way talk about it that it is not right?
Any other questions? Perhaps, ma'am, you can take this one and then.
Yes, it is true, and thank you very much for this question. It is very important to acknowledge what is going on in the world. So besides the ones in which women try to secure a husband, the ones that I mentioned, yes, there are these ones in which violence against women is glorified. And I'm not very familiar with Bollywood, but yes, definitely I can see that in Hollywood movies, and not only, I mean, in national cinematographies as well. And it's very important, I think, for us. So you raised a really important question. It's very important for us and relevant for feminism throughout the world to oppose to these movements and to have a voice. Unfortunately, not very many women dare do that, especially in local contexts. I can tell you about the Romanian context where I come from. Traditionally, we are all aware that in universities where students learn to become actors and actresses, there is a lot of sexism and misogyny taking place, and the young actresses, the young students are pushed towards a lot of degrading actions, and usually they're asked to look beautiful, look their best, and do kind of degrading exercises, supposedly because it is good for them in order to become actresses and so on. And very few women dared, young students, but also more established actresses dared take a stand and talk about that. And I remember that in the last like national award ceremony in which actors and actresses and films, like national ones, received awards. There was an actress who on stage mentioned the fact that she had been submitted to this kind of degrading situations, and immediately a male actor came up and said, a well-known actor, in fact, came up and said, well, you can't take a joke, which is usually the usual, you know, what men and within patriarchy say, you know, you can't take a joke. And of course it was just trying to make it look unimportant. And luckily there was another actress who said, well, I'm very ashamed that you're not taking a stand, and look what is happening, and so on. But unfortunately, we didn't see a follow-up. We didn't see anything going on after that. So I think it's very important for us to do something, but I think at the same time, it is very difficult to have this kind of solidarity, which unfortunately we don't see happening enough. And if you ask me, I don't know, I think we should be more vocal, but in order to be more vocal, we need to be more empowered. And in order to be more empowered, we need to come to courses such as this one and so on. So it's a long, complicated process. In fact, it's very, I have to say, I understand why people are not doing it enough. It's very intimidating to be in this patriarchal world, and especially for younger women, to be in this kind of hierarchical system in which they really need to be able to finish school, to be able to receive roles afterwards, and so on. So there is this system which we need to overcome. And I think we can only do it through solidarity among us. That's why I'm deploring the fact that in Romania we don't have this kind of solidarity, and I'm hoping that we would have global solidarity. But I'm trying to be optimistic about it, but I really don't know if we should be. So I haven't quite answered your question, because you know, the answer is pretty straightforward, but also very difficult at the same time. You know, how are you going to do that?
The encouraging thing is that now actresses are getting mobilized. We saw in Kerala, I was in Kerala, and women, all these actresses, they were there with the women's platform, no, and sharing, supporting each other, creating corpus, so that because once you take out your neck and fight against very barbaric, one actress, the superstar, also organized a gang rape of an actress who stood by his wife, who was a survivor of his violence, domestic violence, and the solidarity that they realized that it is because immediately when you stick out your neck, you are boycotted. No other producer would take you. So what would happen? So I think more and more women getting into the back end job of direction, production, then editing, all these things. Now women say that we don't want to just be the piece of cake on the screen, but even the back end job also in the screen, all of the technical expertise is required. That also we will do. That is one thing. Second one is that even when it comes to Me Too movement, after that, so many women stars, they came out and now they have created a protective mechanism even in Hollywood. So right from Hollywood to Bollywood, we see that some strands are emerging. Another thing is that the extremely barbaric behavior of a misogynist man in the film, two films over there. One is Kabir Khan, other one is Animal. Women's organization have done an extremely important feminist criticism and feminist analysis. In fact, currently the organization called Bebak Collective, which is of a young Muslim women, they have done a threadbare scene by scene deconstruction of the film called Animal. And they say that how the Islamophobia, putting it in the overall context of Islamophobia, they say that the construction of this hero, the actor has been done, the character has been constructed with that, and it is enacted by a Hindu actor. He is not a Muslim actor. Okay. So the demonization, how does it? So they have given the political economy aspect and also the whole identity politics, how it plays even in cinema, no? The way it is, what is there in the reality, it is reflected in cinema. So I think, and I find it very interesting because it is done by the young women who are below the age of 30. So I feel that there is a hope. The legacy with the feminist movement has kept, they are the torchbearers of this kind of, it's very important to, to do this kind of exercise and discuss it in the colleges, schools, community meetings, even the Basti level meetings also, the film Animal has been discussed. They say at one level, pandemic has extremely, like the domestic violence, gender-based violence has increased so much. On the top of it, if you valorize this type of violence and brutality on screen, then what message are you giving to youngsters? No? This is the questioning that has happened. And luckily for us, some of the topmost screenplay writers have stuck out their neck. Men, they have stuck out their neck and they are giving talks that how can you portray such character? What kind of citizenry we are going to create in our country? I think Mr. Javed Ahmed's talk, I was highly impressed what he, and it's there on social media and so many. So in a way, men are also now taking stand on this question of gender relations. No? So it's a glass half full, glass half empty kind of a scenario we have. Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Thank you so
So
much.
glad to hear that in India things are moving faster than in my country. Good, great.
Yeah.
Definitely. Nehaji, if you would like to go ahead next.
Yes. Am I audible, Tripta?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
I think we lost you. Could you?
She's unmuted. Only thing we are not
For
able
example,
to
if you
hear.
look at, am I audible?
Yeah.
Now,
could you,
yes.
go over it
Okay.
again.
Sorry. How do you look at religious portrayal of women? For instance, we have women who are yogis in Hindu culture. They have a proper attire and have a unique way of attracting audiences with the portrayal of single women, unmarried, a mother figure. So I really want to study this, and I am really fascinated as to how will I be able to uh, sort out exactly how do you really liberate yourself from such things that are being portrayed in terms of religion, and how that is not a particular section of empowerment. That is actually a politicization of women itself, as far as the way I look at it. I would just want to have your views on it, if you have some idea about it, or maybe Professor Vibhuti Patel can also add on to it. So yes, over to you. Thank you.
Ma'am, would you like to take a few questions and then maybe?
Yeah.
Pallavi ji, if you would like to go next. If not, then maybe we can go ahead with Nikita ji.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Hi,
Good
thank you for
afternoon.
the. Go ahead, Pallavi.
Ankita Singh.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Vibhuti ma'am and Roxana ma'am. Good afternoon. Ma'am, my question is, as a social entrepreneur, how can I re-empower feminism without breaking the limits of the society, as in India? I'm talking about India, and how to go ahead in my entrepreneurial journey, taking this issue ahead, because I'm working on the ground, I'm working with artisans, as well as because I'm seeing somewhere even the men are also unempowered. They seem helpless because they don't have a job. So I want to cover the whole society. It's not all. It's not always about the females. Sometimes the men are also helpless. So ma'am, please, if you would have understood the question, I would like to know the solution.
Thank you, Ankita ji. Nikita ji, you can go ahead.
Hi, thank you for that global insight. I was just wondering about the eco-feminist movement and really what is the promise and potential for that, especially in the context of the SDGs and, the kind of sustainability challenges that we face. So if you could throw some light on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita ji. And then maybe we can take the last question from Ravideep ji.
Hi, ma'am. Good afternoon. Ma'am, my question is why feminism is only exists in upper class society? And as a woman, you are contribute something to society or your family as you start earning. Then you call yourself as a feminist. Otherwise, you're just being a normal girl, a woman. Otherwise, you don't have any right to say anything about your words and about your rights. You're just being just a normal person. That's my question. Why only exist in an upper class society? Like educated people, not for a normal background, or those who doesn't know about their rights. That's it.
Ma'am, maybe we can take these 4 questions for now.
Okay, maybe the third and the fourth question, because the first 2 questions were about India. So I will let Professor Patel talk about them in more detail. I don't claim to be as familiar with Indian society to be able to answer very specific questions about entrepreneurship or, the first one. So perhaps the one about ecofeminism, I'm a great supporter of ecofeminism, and I think it should have a great future. I believe it will have a great future, but we need a little bit more empowerment maybe and more understanding of what is going on. And I think this will come, ecology in general. And yes, you mentioned the SDGs and United Nations Program for Sustainability, and definitely that's very, very relevant. I think feminism can bring a great contribution to that, and I'm really looking forward to what is going to happen in the future. I'm reading as much as ecofeminism as possible nowadays. Unfortunately, in my part of the world, I don't think it has taken off too much. Especially with the younger generation, for some reason, they don't seem to be so involved. And I really don't know about India. I sure hope it is like with the cinematography and film industry. I hope the situation is better in India than in my part of the world. But definitely in Central and Eastern Europe, these issues of ecology have not are not considered so important. I think somehow people haven't quite understood what we should be doing. But I think with a lot of education and with a lot of efforts, we're gonna get there eventually. What we see is in my part of the world, what we see is that we need a bit of a push from international organizations. So what usually happens is, because we're members of the European Union, they really impose different rules even, you know, like collecting garbage and things like that. They really impose those rules and then we follow. But I think feminism really hasn't done everything that in my part of the world, at least, what they could have done. So I'm really looking forward to saying more about this. And the last question, which was about you know, why this is more for upper class women. Of course, we know that starting from the first wave of feminism, as the, you know, the categorization goes in the Western world, educated women who were educated not in the sense of formal education, because there was no formal education for women there then, but educated within their families and so on, and people who had a lot of money, who could usually have this kind, I mean, who open their eyes and understand much better. But I think nowadays we also see the goods movement happening, maybe with a little push, not for upper class women, from upper class women, but from educated women who come from within the vulnerable communities, but who manage to get an education in a way. So I really, I think maybe is a little similar. In Romania, we have Roma women, so people belonging to the Roma community, women who managed to are very vulnerable. They're a very discriminated group. They're very vulnerable, especially women in these communities. They're very much discriminated. Most of them are illiterate, but the government is trying a little bit, not enough in my opinion, but a little bit to help them with their education. So we have reserved seats for the education of these women, and little by little we can see that the situation is changing. So now we have grassroots movement of women's non-governmental organizations trying to mobilize women in local communities, local Roma communities, and then they try to do things that are important and relevant for them, such as entrepreneurship or helping or developing community spirit and helping among themselves and doing a lot of things. Also in artistic circles, they have managed to get. So in my part of the world, also the movement that I talked about, Ni Una Menos, in South America, is a grassroots movement. They really come from different parts of the population, not just educated women. In Poland as well, I know that there is a movement, an anti-abortion movement, because they have very strict abortion policies, and they're fighting for reproductive rights for women. And they declare themselves populist feminists, because they are also a very grassroots movement, trying to mobilize women from different strata of society, not necessarily, as you said, upper class women. So this is happening, but maybe not to the level we would wish it happening. So these are my answers, and I'm letting now Professor Patel to give hers, especially to the first two questions that I really wouldn't dare open my mouth about.
Now, whether you use the term feminism or not, it is not important, because there are those who call them, there are Dalit women who are extremely articulate, who are mobilizing thousands of people they call themselves womanist. Okay, or there are women who say that they believe in women's liberationist, or they say we are fighting for women's rights. But we work in unison, because feminism is not an anathema. Otherwise, person like us would not have any, because we are the like branded feminists right from the 1970s. But the collaboration takes place. So maybe perspective, and that is the dynamism of women's movement, no? Because you have plurality of perspective. Your way of addressing patriarchy or bringing social transformation may have different ideological moorings, but there is solidarity. I think that's most important. That's one thing. And other thing, that grassroots feminism, it varies from state to state. There are state like Maharashtra, you would say even the first generation learners, even in the remotest part of the state, who are in the deep forest in tribal area, they have also mobilized. And the person who is responsible for that, the main mentor, is a feminist, and they have a very cordial relationship with that. But there are other areas in the country where you don't have any legacy of either social reform movement or the freedom movement. Also, it was very low-key participation of women. And now even the social movements are very weak. There, the trajectory is very different. They are more implementing the government's program of empowerment of women or whatever. But within the social, like non-government culture, it is not there. So things are varying. Most important thing is that you fight against the issue-to-issue, issue-based collaborations you have. That is important. Now, the question of challenges before the social entrepreneur, they were there even in the 80s. Like we know that these Madhubani painters, there were so many studies right from 1975 to 1980. That was the mandate. What is the contribution of women in the poverty groups to the Indian economy? And as a result of it, so many studies were done about women and work, and the kind of exploitation that was exploitation and oppression, injustice and discrimination that they were facing. As a result of which, so many social entrepreneurs, they came out, they gave up their job, corporate job, and started organizing these women. Some of the good, excellent examples are that of Ila Bhatt, who was a labor lawyer, and she formed Seva. Or you have Prema Taipura. She was a trade unionist in Mumbai, and when she saw thousands of women were retrenched from the textile industry, she mobilized them into a Mahila Mandal, a cooperative, and which started providing food packets to the migrant workers. Bombay has the highest number of migrants, and they started providing this thing, and Annapurna started like that. Similarly, a woman who was executive MBA from IIM, when she heard these Madhubani painters who were giving their testimony that how after putting in 7 days of labor, because it's a very super specialized type of painting, which 1 day takes only in the drawing. They have to draw it with the charcoal, and then they make the colors by going into the forest and get all the vegetable colors. And these paintings, when they make, agent would come and he would not pay even the cost of production of this way. 7 days of labor has gone into it. They would not give. Moreover, he would pit one woman against the other, to continuously creating wedges between the women of the village and sexually exploiting them. And this testimony, when it was narrated in one of the gatherings of women in the 80s, that this woman from MB, who was MB, she said, "I'm giving up my job. Come, we all artisans will get organized, whether you are a potter or a painter or a weaver or a this thing, doing this tailored ready-made garments you are making. I am for this thing." And they launched an organization called Dastakar, and it's a traveling exhibition where all the artisans, the women artists, they do direct sell. And this model became so popular that even at a subnational level, several state governments, they said, if the cluster of women can do this much, state can do quite a lot. And they also started, the woman chief minister of Delhi, she started this thing called a place in city of Delhi for artisans to come and sell their product without any commission, which the agents would take, Delhi Heart, they call it. Similarly, many other states also came up with the Heart. In Kutch, in the desert area also, they created a campus where one artisan can come for 10 days, they can come, and everything is looked after by them, and whatever their products they have made, they can do direct sell. So there are many such best practices that we see with the social enterprise. Like person like Jyoti Mapsekar, she was a librarian in a school of architect, and she was in a women's movement. And when she was narrating what was happening every day, she would see her house is near the biggest garbage hump of the Bombay city, Devnar. So she would see all these recycling workers and their miserable condition, wounds on their hand, police brutalizing them, their children being eaten up by the dogs on that, because there was no creche. And she got so moved, she gave up her job as a librarian, and she mobilized, called Parisar Vikas, which is also influenced by ecofeminist. And the organization of these women, it was a social enterprise project, because not only mobilization, but also seeing to it that whatever waste material which they have collected, they get better price for it. How to do the segregation, then organic waste, how to do the composting, then so that way collective endeavor, and then see to it that their daughters don't have to do this job. So even the starting the education program, training program, sanitary inspection program, now the work has expanded in manifold. So I think individually you may face so many problems and with chanting and the backlash, okay, in the marketplace, because all the markets are segmented, they are power ridden, they are socially constructed, where there is always a discrimination against women. But if a collective effort is made, so even as a social entrepreneur, you could be, and for both men and women, because Seva supported even the men who were at the receiving end, especially the block printing work, which was they were doing. They were not getting market. In fact, they did not even have a workshop. And when Seva was formed, all these people who were thrown out of the organized sector and who were self-employed, they got they were organized by Seva, and now they have expanded it from Seva Ahmedabad, it became Seva Gujarat, it became Seva Bharat, Seva Asia, and they are also now supporting women's organizations in the African countries, how to do this mobilization, what are the local resources, what are your livelihood strategies, and how can we address them locally through the bottom-up approach by bringing new policies, new legislation, and also addressing the financial institutions for the upscaling of the work. So I think as a social entrepreneur, you can do quite a lot, because you won't be only doing the awareness generation, you will also bringing the alternatives. Here I have these two activists from Awaz and ISWA group. They work among the poorest of the poor Muslim. I'm speaking from their room. And they have been working, they have organized thousands of women in the city of Mumbai, and now they have offices in several, one main office. They work with the young women, they work with the women, self-employed women. They also organize the educational program, and they have a health center and a lot of empowering activities among the poorest of the poor marginalized women. So, and it is not only awareness generation and discussion on feminism, but bringing transformative changes in the lives of women.
Thank you so much, Mark, for answering all of the questions. Being cognizant of the time, I would like to thank Professor Roxana for her time. And perhaps we can move on to the next session. I would like...
You set the tone. Excellent.
Yeah.
Perspective. Very insightful.
Absolutely.
Yes,
thank you so much, Roxana, ma'am, for your time.
Yeah.
And now I would like to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel to proceed with her session on empowerment and development initiatives for women in India. An overview. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. So thank you, friends. And is my PPT visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So my presentation is about the I'm trying, it's a long span of time. I'm trying to capture what happened during last 8 decades in our country, in India. Mainly the gender perspective that evolved in the 70s, which is concerned about women's equality, and also the analytical tool and the worldview, which I think Professor Roxana put it in front of us in a very, with lot of data and lot of case studies, and also how to change the material basis for women's independence and also enhance women's autonomy. That has been the perspective with which one has tried to understand the unfolding reality and the developmental discourse in India. So gender perspective is very important for facilitation of the process of recognizing and giving due importance to contribution of men and women, to examine the reasons for subordination of women and why the male domination still persists, how to attain gender justice, and what have been the effective role in decision-making processes which men and women have. And also visibility of women as change agents. Visibility of women is there in even Bollywood, it is there in Hollywood, but not as an object, not as a piece of cake, not as a spare part for sale, but as a individual, as a citizen. What has been her what is the visibility of women, to identify and understand roots of inequality that result in invisibility, marginalization, and exclusion of women from the intellectual world. You may be allowed to be in any sector of the economy, so far as you don't open your mouth. You have to be, in current times, you have to be intelligent to do everything, but at the same time, you don't have a representation. If you have representation, you don't have a voice. So women are thrown out of the intellectual world. So how to, the effort that the women's movement has tried is to have a say and representation in the intellectual world, and also social action, which are aimed at equality, development, peace, education, health, and employment. Now, what we have seen, and I think Dr. Roxana also told us that how the changing economy, what we are seeing in country like India, that incorporation of subsistence economy into the modern market economy has brought into question the traditional gender-based division of labor as an organizing principle in the rural and urban and even tribal areas. They are in a different form it has taken, but the injustices and discrimination still remain. Women end up doing less skilled work, they are underpaid, and they are expected to contribute to the survival needs of the family without any corresponding benefits. It was the Esther Bosrup, an economist from Denmark, who tried to understand African polygamy. She wanted to understand why African man had so many wives. The way media and the Western media and the Hollywood, and they had projected African man as a human incarnation of a lust. That African man had an unlimited libido, the way they are doing it now about the Muslim man. So she wanted to understand what were the material reality which resulted in polygamy in Africa. She found out 7 factors. She did the research not as an outsider, but it was a participatory action research. She lived with the community. She observed the labor processes and labor relations and found out that Africa had a 500 years of history of slavery, where all adult men were deported. They were taken away to build the empire of 65 countries. And these migrant workers, there were massive mortality of this African man. Number 2, Africa, that's why the sex ratio was favorable to women. There were 2,500 women for 1,000 men. That means for every woman, there were 2.5 men. So that was one very important reality. Second one was that Africa did not have domestic animal. They had wild animals. So they did not have cows, buffalo, horse, camel, which could be used for agriculture. So it was a sheer human labor which was important for the survival of the community. Number 3, Africa did not have agricultural technology. In our context, if you see the Indus Valley civilization, we had plow even 5,000 years back. Even in the Harappa civilization, when the excavation took place, they could find plow. Africa did not have. They were using digging stick to dig the land, and so that also demanded tremendous human labor. Fourth one was that Africa had patriarchy. Like the patriarchy is universal. They also had a patriarchy. One thing the patriarchy thrives on: control over sexuality, fertility, and labor of women. And any man who would have more women and more children would be able to cultivate more land. In the absence of any technology or domestic animal, where the human labor is very important, and that means the powerful man would have more wives, because he uses his brute force, and he takes domination over the other tribe, and all the women of that tribe, they also become his wives. So and African society also recognized women as a contributor to the economy. That means women are hardworking. That is very much culturally, historically accepted. That they like in our society, women are always considered to be parasite, okay, sponge on the economy, which is not the culture of Africa. In any tribal culture, woman is treated as a worker, and if you have more workers, you can cultivate more land, and if you can cultivate more land, you can become economically more powerful, and concentration of and centralization of economic power gives you more power in the community. Now, these are the factors which resulted in polygamy in Africa. This is the material, this provides material basis for African polygamy. But what Esther Bossum found out that what was the externality in her study? That she wanted to understand polygamy. What she ended up finding out is that women's labor, women and child's labor in a subsistence economy is most important for food security and food sovereignty of any community. So in the subsistence economy, the labor, women's labor becomes very important, which her work, which you can download now, there is no copyright on it, Women's Role in Economic Development. Now in this book, she has narrated it so beautifully. She has used anthropological and ethnographical methods also, though she's an economist, to show that don't treat women as a parasite on the economy. They are not the sponge on the economy. They are the main contributor to the economy, which resulted in a perspective called women in development. Now, the moment this book became, it had a massive snowballing effect. All world leaders were enthralled by this book. The kind of excitement which the Gunnar Myrdal had generated by writing 3 volumes of Asian drama and also Challenge to World Poverty in the 70s. This book in 72 created that kind of a buzz. And as a result of this, which United Nations started ECOSOC, Economic and Social Status of Women. Now, in India, if we see the whole journey, you can see that it was in 1935 when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, as a student leader, gave a vision statement that independent India, what kind of society we want in independent India. And he was highly influenced by the Russian Revolution. He was also influenced by, he believed in the pluralism and multi-party system and democracy. So he talked about the mixed economic model. What he said, and there were 2 leaders at that time in the post-Second World War period I'm talking about. At one level, Europe was getting this thing, America was helping their Marshall Plan had come up for reconstruction of European economy, which was damaged by Hitler and fascism. That leaders, so many countries from Africa, Latin America, and Asia, the liberation struggles had started. Freedom movement in India resulted in 1947 as India becoming independent, and 2 leaders, leader from Egypt, President Nasser, and Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, both of them were influenced to a certain extent. They were influenced by the Russian Revolution and the kind of new workers' state that had come up. But at the same time, they said that they did not believe in the centralized planned economy, but what they wanted was a mixed economy, that the strategic sector of the economy would be with the government, while the private sector will be allowed in a manufacturing sector. And they said that we have to focus on eradication of poverty, for which we need to have a high growth. So growth was a very central axis on which, if you read the first 5-year plan, second 5-year plan, the way they targeted for the growth, and they said trickle down. Once you have a high economic growth, once the pie of economic growth becomes larger and larger, each section of society will get a larger share of the national income, which is known as a trickle down theory. That apki tanki mein, even on your tank, if you have more water, you will get water. Everybody would get water for a longer time. So but by 1960s, what we saw that increasing the whole dream of independent India was shattering because of high unemployment. We had two wars, Indo-China War, Indo-Pakistan War, Bangladesh liberation struggle, which also put a lot of pressure on the Indian economy. We had a galloping inflation, we have black marketing, and it is at that time that we also saw rise of a peasant movement, student movement, Dalit movement, tribal communities getting organized, and we at one level churning that was happening. At a top level was Asian drama had created a lot of buzz among the administrators and bureaucrats and politicians, where Gunnar Myrdal advised the leaders of Asian countries that don't think that investment in education or investment in health is an act of charity. No, it is a fundamental necessity of your economy, because unless you have a healthy and educated workforce, your country will never get high growth. Capital is not only machine and land and building. Capital is also human capital. And the approach that was promoted by Gunnar Myrdal was the human capital formation approach. which was critiqued by Pakistani economist Mehboob Haq and Amartya Kumar Sen, who said that how can you talk of only human capital formation? That means you would invest in human beings so that they give you high productivity. So what do you think? Won't you invest in children? Won't you invest in person with disability? Won't you invest in the elderly people who are not contributing directly to the economy? They said that we should have a right-based perspective. If right to food, right to education, right to freedom, right to justice, right to dignity. So the whole churning that started happening by early 70s was at one level, human development approach, which was promoted and got global acceptance and praise by the development economist. And on the other hand, we had Esther Bosrup's work, Women's Role in Economic Development, that impacted the thinking about of 165 nation states, where realization came that women's liberation or women's equality will not come automatically. We need affirmative action. In India, after the freedom movement, there was an understanding that, in Indian freedom movement, millions of women took part, they quoted arrest, and they were in Quit India movement, and we had so many stalwarts who contributed for India's freedom. And then, so women's question is solved. We have a very progressive constitution. But Towards Equality report, which was a 21-member interdisciplinary status of women's committee, they traveled throughout the country. They spoke to women of all different sections of the economy, different geographies. They traveled from Assam to Gujarat and Kanyakumari to Kashmir, and they came out with this voluminous report. You can download the report. It is there in English and several Indian languages. It is urban summary reports are there in most of the Indian languages, and that became the galvanizing force to bring new realization among bureaucrats, politicians, and the grassroots activists that you need to address women's question. And this Towards Equality report had a 3 startling revelation. Continuously declining sex ratio from 1891, when the first census was taken, till the 1974, where this, oh my God, I need to connect my, I need to connect. Is it connected? Okay. So let me see, huh? मेरा ये बैटरी डाउन. Okay. So then after that, the question, the Shram Shakti report we got in 1988, when the Ilaben became a Rajya Sabha member. We also had a national perspective plan for women in 1988 because the Madam Margaret Alva, who was a member of the member secretary of this committee, chaired by Mr. Rajiv Gandhi. She also, we had a women's movement also contributed a great deal to this report. Human resource development approach was adopted by India in the Planning Commission, and India for the first time came up with the Human Development Report in 2002 and 2012. So these were some of the landmark contributions that happened as a result of the new understanding on the women's question. What we see is in 1974, when the Towards Equality report was presented, the women's contribution in the economy became a central axis of the understanding, where Amrita Pritam, in response to Towards Equality report, which showed declining sex ratio, declining work participation of women, and extremely high maternal mortality of women, that she wrote this epic poem called From Darkness of Womb to Silence of Grave. And in that, this whole verses on, it's an epic long poem which talks about women's life right from the time she is in her mother's tummy till she dies. So, Poke Andhere Se Kabr Ki Shanti Tak. That was the poem Amrita Pritam wrote. And about women's work, what she says, that housewife, if the woman's husband asks, what does his wife do? The answer is, my wife doesn't work. Then, who bears this world in a womb? Who gives birth to the farmers and workers? Who cooks, washes, cleans, and fills water? Looks after the child and the sick? Whose labor gives man leisure for liquid, tobacco, and card session? Whose labor gives man their strength to go to work? Whose labor without being noticed, mutely working, without being paid, without being appreciated ever? Now, this kind of questioning, even the women's studies centers and the researchers, ICSSR gave a mandate in 1975 to all the universities to prioritize research on women, especially women in poverty groups and the work that they are doing. So as a result of this effort, what happened that the conventional indicators of development, such as modernization, green revolution, blue revolution, industrialization, agricultural mechanization, urbanization, automation, IT revolution, were critiqued because all these processes had bypassed women. And they said that we need a redefine what do we mean by development, and the new development, the approaches which the planning commission also accepted was first one in the 6th five-year plan. If you see, it accepted the perspective of women in development, which was influenced by Esther Bosrup's work in Africa. That women in development approach explains the reasons for women being treated as beneficiaries of crumbs thrown at them in the margin of the economy, women as consumers as an auxiliary labor force to be utilized in the crisis period and eased out the moment men are ready to take over. So the discourse revolved around economic growth paradigm because women in development approach only talked about in the existing growth model how to integrate women, which was questioned by a person like Ila Bhatt, who said that growth was going in one direction, women were at the bottom of the pyramid. So what we need is that women and development, women should also develop, and when the country develops, and this integrates women's development work as an active agent. Women as an active agent, affirmative action by the state, proactive approach of civil society organizations through voluntary organization, NGOs. This is the model of empowerment of women against forces of patriarchal class society. So the whole thing about the development of NGOs and voluntary organizations to generate employment generation programs that was adopted, you can see in the 7th, 8th five-year plan. Then in 1985, when the Nairobi conference took place, where they talked about the forward-looking strategy, the realization came that if we are mobilizing only women, if only women get active for their concern, we are not achieving much because all the power structures are controlled by men. What we need is a gender. Instead of only talking about patriarchy, let us talk about power. I think what Roxana Marinescu talked about, the wave 3, of the women's movement or the world feminism, in that it coincided with gender as an analytical category, that how gender, where man, women, sexual minorities, all are socially constructed. And these are based on the power relationship, subordination, domination relationship, and gender relations are determined by the complex interplay of power relation, where the person like Professor Crenshaw talked about intersectionality, that intersectional vulnerabilities generated by caste, class, race, religion, ethnicity, location, language, we need to be sensitive about who gains from any processes that are happening and who are the loser, who are included, who are the excluded, who are in the mainstream, who are at the margin. That question we need to ask. Now, another very important understanding, that perspective that came, was that patriarchy, how does patriarchy operate in the different systems and different sectors of the economy? We need to see the operation of patriarchy in any issue that we are fighting for, whether it is a question of marriage, divorce, custody of child, guardianship rights, alimony, maintenance, property rights, or inheritance rights. All of them we need to see from the gender lens, and we have to see the connection between public and private. It was the very most famous slogan of women's movement is personal is political. You can't separate women's lives into personal and political, because this dichotomy has created exclusion and subordination for women. Now coming to the women who are from the upper stratum of society, who are more qualified, highly educated, who may have a corporate job, there too patriarchy prevails. And that's why now we hear this term called glass ceiling. Glass ceiling refers to the fact that qualified person wishing to advance within the hierarchy of his or her organization is stopped at the lower level due to discrimination based because of sexism or racism. Or the glass ceiling refers to vertical discrimination and frequently against women, mostly that we see. But sometimes it also happens against the transgender person and also against the people who are considered to be lower caste or from the minority religious groups. Glass walls, when we talk about, it's the term and glass wall or glass elevator refers to the institutional barrier that isolates some employees, traditionally women and minorities, into jobs that don't lead to executive advancement within the business. For example, if you are a Safai Kamgar, if you are a waste manager, you stuck for 30, 40, 50 years. You are stuck there. It doesn't allow you to even along with that work, if you are even finishing your studies. We know a lady in Mumbai, she completed, along with doing a work of a waste manager, she also completed her bachelor's from SNDT. We have another person who is doing PhD from TISS, but he is still stuck at that job. The glass walls are such, and that is because of the caste-based barrier. Glass cliff is a women in leadership role, such as business executives or social entrepreneurs in a corporate world, or female candidates within the political offices are more likely than men to be promoted to leadership roles during the period of crisis or downturn, when the chance of failure are high. Because so many women candidates of political parties, they say that we have given 30, 40, 45 years to our political party. We joined in a student movement. Now too we are stuck as volunteer. And the only time we were given candidature was such where opposition candidate was so powerful, we were 100% sure that we are going to lose the seat. That seat was given to us. So many times it happened. And that we see even in the university system, which are the positions they would give to women. ICC, Internal Complaints Committee, it's a very tough job because the person who indulges in sexual harassment, so many times they are violent, they are retaliatory. And if they are later on, when they become powerful, they retaliate against the women who have been part of the WDC. Fourth phenomena that happens is a sticky floor. The term sticky floor is used to describe discriminatory employment pattern that keeps certain groups of people at the bottom of the job scale. They are called pink collar jobs, such as those in administrative support or helping fields, where you are just stuck. You are a clerk, you join as a clerk, after 40 years, you retire as a clerk. So they are called sticky floor. Though you are efficient, you have gained experience, you have seniority, but you will never be promoted or given more challenging job. Leaky pipeline. Leaky pipeline refers to the progressive reduction in women's participation at different stages of career progression in science, in technology, in engineering, and mathematics, especially in the STEM subject. You see that women's participation reduces. And currently also we have seen that UGC boasts about so many millions of women having professional degree, but they are not getting entry. I was in Kerala, where Calicut University, where they, from engineering, all the placement cells, women applicants in engineering or management or law or medicine, they were not selected by the corporate people who came there for a job. All men got their placement, but women were not taken. So this is a leaky pipeline. So formally you have equality, but you don't give them equal opportunity or equal treatment. So as a result of this ideology, what happens? This is the global pyramid. We see that what kind of employment women get. In Fortune 500 companies, out of total employees, when women are 44.7%, I'm talking about global. So there are many countries in which women are there in Fortune 500, but they are at the bottom. So they are either as a peon or a clerk or a cleaning worker or assistant or PA. First level, 36%. Executive level, 25%. So, and board of seats, 21%. Top earners, 11%. And CEO level, only 5.8% women are there in the global economy. So you can imagine. And that's why this year's study, which was done by this year's Nobel Prize, which she got from Harvard University professor. She has shown that after 200 years of capitalist development, women are discriminated in terms of wage, in terms of position in the economy, even when they are equally qualified. There was a first level where they were employed as unskilled labor. After they got education, still they remained at the bottom of the pyramid. After they got professional degree, they remained at the bottom of the pyramid. And even after gaining experience and continuously lifelong learning they do and increase their skills and intellectual endowment, they are not elevated. So the empowered woman, when we talk about empowerment of women, which is the topic of today's discourse, that empowered woman is one who has agency to formulate strategic choices, to control resources and decisions that affect important life outcomes. So empowerment of women ensures their agency to use their rights, their capabilities, the resources, the place in decision-making bodies, such as is provided through leadership opportunities, participation in political institutions, need for systemic and structural changes. That means we can get the empowerment. Any nation state strives to for empowerment of women through legislative route, that means legal reforms, judicial route, that means fighting public interest litigation, progressive and landmark judgments, fighting legal battles in the lower court, high court, and Supreme Court. Political route is a voters campaign, social movement route, mass mobilization at a grassroots level, and mainstreaming gender concerns. So all those who are in the different expert committees, gender concerns in education, in politics, in economy, everywhere you do the mainstreaming, bring in the gender concerns. These are the routes. And this is the how all sectors of the society, all sectors of the economy, we see to it that we counter the domination, the subordination domination relationship based on the foundation of inequality, and try to make strategic intervention, targeted intervention in whichever phase we are in. If we are in anti-poverty program, or if we are fighting the health issues, or if we are fighting against HIV/AIDS, if we are fighting against gender-based violence, we are talking about the peace between two countries, everywhere we have to bring the gender lens. Now, another very important way in which we can address gender concern is by having accurate data system. That means visibility of women and gender in data system is very important. You have to have a gender-aware data system of literacy, education, employment, health, well-being, and also gender development index. That we are not only talking about human development index, which talks about health, education, employment, but gender development within health. What is the gender gap? Within employment sector, what is the gender gap? Or within the health indicators, what are the life expectancy? What is the demography of gender? So this is very important, and addressing gender disparities is very important. And this disparities is not only in question of in the area of development, but also empowerment, which is called Gender Empowerment Index. So Gender Empowerment Index has two more indicators. Along with education, health, and employment, there are indicators of how many positions are there, what is the participation of women in decision-making bodies, in the political bodies, in the administrative structures, in the corporate world, and what kind of progressive legislations to ensure equality, gender-based equality, are there. Another thing that when the globalization process became after 1991, we saw that so many massive structural changes happened in the economies, and as a result of which the issue of the new kind of challenges that we faced, basically the special needs population, person with disabilities, women-headed household, child workers, poverty groups, they suffered a lot. Neoliberal economy also forced the state to withdraw from its welfare function and leave everything to the market, which also created tremendous human misery. Dowry has escalated to a great extent that even women earning, working women, highly educated women, they also become the victim of dowry. And we are recently seeing so many horrible cases of dowry, even in the progressive state of Kerala, which has a very high human development index. Another battle that is happening is that whole neoclassical model of economic development, which only talks about the gender absent approach, that the theories which are there, whether it's a marginal utility theory, which talks of a maximization of consumption as a consumer, maximization of satisfaction, and as a producer, maximization of profit, that has been critiqued by the gender economists. Person like Amartya Kumar Sen, Martha Nussbaum, they are talking about the cooperative conflict, that it is not a question of just conflict within the family, that who will get, if there are limited resources for education or for food or for care, or who will get more attention, boy or a girl. They say that it is not just it is a cooperative conflict. We need to negotiate. It's not going to be, it's not God-given. We have created this kind of unequal relation, and it is possible to negotiate. And how do you negotiate? You negotiate individually, the community negotiates, the laws are put in place so that the people have to, if you make a compulsory education, universal education, then obviously everyone has to send their daughters to the school, or you also use the communication media and you change the mindset of the people. That is very important. Another very important philosophical debate that we have had over last 30 years is about that, can we allow laissez-faire in the matter of gender relations? Laissez-faire means automatically market will be the equalizer, which is not proved to be wrong. Market is not an equalizer. Market is segmented. Market is layered. It is based on the hierarchy, caste, class, religion, location, your proficiency of language that you have play very important role. So we need to empower the weak through affirmative action, through special schemes, special program, gender responsive budgeting. Dr. Roxana talked about gender responsive. She said that gender responsive budgeting is a very important tool which has been used. What do we do? There are 5 important areas in the society where there is gender gap. In education, health, employment, there is a gender-based violence, and there is a decision-making role are not given. On all these 5 areas, how to reduce the gender gap, how do we use the budget, how do we use the allocation of finances, and how do we convert the gender commitments or the equality commitments which are ensured by the Constitution of India, translate them into the financial commitment? Because in the market economy, without backing up of money, funds, functions, and functionaries, you can't change the reality. So that is very, very, very important measure. It's a tool. Question of computing of the Gender Development Index. There are 3 important dimensions, indicators of the GDI. One is a long and healthy life. Second is a knowledge, that means education. And third is a decent standard of living. So these are the indicators by which the GDI are computed. As per the United Nations UNDP, in 2018, India ranked 130 out of 189 countries. Within South Asia, India's Human Development Index was above average of 0.6 for the region. By Bangladesh and Pakistan and countries with similar population, they were ranked 136 and 158th respectively. Between 1990 and 2017, India's life expectancy at birth increased by 11 years. In 2018, Indian school-age children could expect stay in school for 4.7 years. So at least up to 4th standard or up to, say, 5th standard, they could go 5th standard, and they had to give up their studies after that. India's gross national income per capita increased staggeringly by 266.6% in those 27 years. And gender gap in the work participation, that became the most deplorable, because in the year 2000, we had 40% work participation of women. By 2017, it became only 27%, 7-point decline that we got. And what we see recently, like in the HDI, where some of the countries of Africa, which adopted, they were poorer than us in terms of gross domestic product, but they had a gender equal policies in place. They ranked very high. They ranked as high as that of their rank was that of Nordic countries, especially the Somalia and also Rwanda. The way they regenerated their economy. And that's why when Dr. Roxana also talked about the gender mainstreaming, that how do we do gender mainstreaming? How do we link gender equality and the issues that you are confronting in front of you? Opportunities for introducing gender perspective in whichever portfolio, whichever work that you are doing, and what kind of methodology you would have, whether you would enter laterally, you would use the legal framework and the legal route, you would participation in decision making and politics, that would be the route, or mobilization of women that at a grassroots level, that strategy you would use for gender mainstreaming. Now, the institutional developments, within the institution, how do you bring gender equality? What kind of rules and regulations you have? What kind of architecture and infrastructure you provide? What kind of admission policies and the gender-friendly work culture you create? They also become very important. Now, the same thing is reflected in the Millennium Development Goal. India's commitment to Millennium Development Goal in the year 2000 was one targeted intervention in goal number 3 to promote gender equality and empowerment, and all remaining goals, right to food came as a result of goal number 1. Okay, India passed Right to Food Act, right to Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan came as a result of India's commitment to goal number 2, achieve universal primary education. Janani Suraksha, the gender equality is gender 3. Reduction of child mortality came because of India's commitment to Janani Suraksha, to reduction of child mortality. India is one of the countries marked by very high maternal mortality and child mortality. Anemia is the major killers for Indian women. Mainly not only because of poverty, but along with that, even the gender norms. Indian women eating last, least, and leftover. That is also the major this thing. Improve maternal health was goal number 5. Combat HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, goal number 6. Goal number 7 was ensure environmental sustainability, and goal number 8 was global partnership for development. So in all these things, gender was integrated after the evaluation, which was done after 5 years of MDG. There was also criticism by the women's movement that goal number 3 did not include gender-based violence. So that inadequacy was overcome in the Sustainable Development Goal. And what we saw that in Sustainable Development Goal, there are 17 goals, and in the 17 goals also similar targeted intervention through goal number 5, gender equality, but all other 17 development goals, all other 16 development goals, you have to integrate, embed, and mainstream gender, whether you are talking of poverty or hunger or reduction of inequality, decent work, or clean energy, climate resilience. Everywhere you have to clean drinking water. So all these concerns, they are marked by and also gender-based violence is also taken up as a very serious concern of the Sustainable Development Goal. Now, all 17 Sustainable Development Goals have 169 targets. So that targeted intervention they are demanding from each and every nation state, because in Millennium Development Goal, what we found that several African countries, they surpassed India. Especially the African countries, especially when it came to maternal mortality, African countries reduced maternal mortality by half, which was a major achievement. By just changing the birth practices, women were delivering babies while standing. What they provided was an ambulance. That any woman in labor, the moment by then, I think mobile connectivity had also increased. And if the health center is informed about it, within 30 minutes, ambulance would reach that place and woman would be made to deliver baby while lying down in the ambulance. And that resulted in a massive improvement in maternal health as well as child survival. Now, these are some of the important publications which you can read, and they are written in a very, very lucid style. Bosrup's work is there in public domain. Claudia Goldwyn's work, where she talked Goldin, she got the Nobel Prize for her work on U-shaped female labor force function in economic development and economic history. What she tries to prove, she has got in collected data of last 200 years of capitalist development of several countries. Wherever she could not get the metadata, nationwide data, she went through the annual reports of the companies, and she had come up with the pattern that there is a U-shaped curve phenomena. If you say on the graph, on the y-axis, you have work participation, and y-axis, you have a level of development, and x-axis, you have work participation, the kind of shape you would get for women's work participation. So in a subsistence economy, the in the curve, women's participation would be high. When the prosperity increases, man's wages are increasing, women are pulled out of subsistence economy, and these women who become housewives, their daughters are given quality with their education, because the quality of life has improved. And when they get their daughters, they enter into the service sector. So this is how we talk about the U-shaped curve phenomena, which has happened in several countries. Government of India's Towards Equality report is available. Shram Shakti report is in the public domain. National Perspective Plan for Women, I have also shared the link. Mahbubul Haq's works are there. Report on the Human Development Report in South Asia, where he talks about the gender question, and also in all 9 South Asian countries. Naila Kabir's work on empowerment, reverse reality, and gender hierarchies. It is also very popular book. Most of the libraries have, and also on the internet, there are many articles and YouTube lectures by her. Mainstreaming Gender in Social Protection for Informal Economy. That is a word, how in the global economy, 92% of women are in the informal sector, where Smita Mishra Panda's work is there. Now, SAGE has made it public, so you can engender governance, how each and every aspect of governance can be engendered, what can be the entry point, what kind of measures we need to take up, what kind of structures and mechanisms we have to create within the system that she has discussed. Caroline Moser was a very popular teacher of economics of London School of Economics. She trained IAS officers and administrators in developing countries. Her book, Gender Planning and Development, also is a extremely popular, very easily understandable this thing, which any development professional from any discipline can understand. And she was the person who started Gender and Development Desk of the World Bank way back in the 90s. Martha Nussbaum and Amartya Sen's work, Quality of Life, is very important, where they talk about entitlement and the right-based perspective. We are not seeing human being as a human capital, but whether they are capital or not, every human being has a right to education, food, development. So the question of entitlement they have discussed. Our book is on macroeconomic policies, how the Millennium Development Goals were operationalized within the macroeconomy of different countries, and discourse on gender and development. So these are some of the interesting, useful further readings for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vibhuti ma'am, for such an insightful session. Maybe we can go on with the question and answers.
Yeah.
Any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask, or put them in the chat box here. Any questions at all? You can raise your hands as well.
There are, I think in chat box they have written.
This was for Roxana. Okay, we have Shweta ji.
Yeah, I think Roxana, that question on we have moved towards post and decolonial feminist movement. Now, post-colonial feminist methodology, there is a move to further get into subjective experiences of individual women. While this is significant, how can it be incorporated into the public policy? I think very interesting, very important question. I think wherever we talk about the universalist approach, there are so many who are left out. So that is why post-structuralism, which talks about the individual identity, which is very important, because when you talk about the post-colonial feminism, even among them, there is a class, there is a caste, there is a unequal relation among different segments of society. So being sensitive to the intersectional vulnerability, that is one. Being conscious of our privileges and using our privileges for enhancement of the entitlements of those who are left out and those who are at the margin. I think that is the only way in which we can create a more equal society, and society based on foundation of equality. Yeah. Shwetama Raj. Yeah.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Thank you so much for this. I didn't know how the time passed by, like 1 hour, and like deeply listening to you. So my question is,
Challenging job. I had to cover 80 years of India's history. So
that's what I mean. I somehow my interest was, was continuously made without any distraction. So yeah, my question is, like, in my daily life, I have come across some men who are like, when I talk about them, like, I want to, I am a working woman, but when I talk more about my work, my, me getting empowerment, or me working in various sections wherever I want, and then they are like, you girls first want to work full time, and then you will ask for, then you will, carry the flags of feminism, then you will go for a women empowerment march, and then you will ask for reservations, then facilities, and perks like that, where you have to avoid your job, and as well as you want to work also. So they expect, like, if you're a woman, then even if I'm working 12 hours or 10 hours, then also I'm expected to perform some of my household chores, like making food, or preparing bed or something like that. So it's like, if I'm working 12 hours and if you are also working 12 hours, so my work is a little bit not counter in that sense, even if I'm making more money than him, or if I'm making less money than him. Then I think how to tackle this situation, be it with any man, my father, my husband, my any of the co-workers who say such things to me.
Yeah, first of all, that whether you are in a workplace or in your kinship network or in your family, everywhere, like, you are at the receiving end, because see, always you have to prove yourself. Even if you are more efficient, you have to, there will be backlash from men. Okay,
Yeah.
but because you are more articulate and you are more this. In fact, most of the cases of sexual harassment are of those who men feel insecure about, that this woman is going to get promotion earlier than me, and then they all gang up and use the weapon of sexual harassment. So it is like that. Dusra, the gender-based division of labor. Why are we using the stereotypes that housework or care work is a women's job? Care work is everybody's job. So
Yes.
you need to change that kind of a mindset, and that has to happen from a early childhood. So were you and your brother treated in the same way? That question we need to ask. Another thing, that the kind of privileges every husband has, like when I had a child, even one day my husband looked after, he would get so much sympathy from all over the world, neighbors, relatives. Poor him, maa dekho fek ke chali gayi. This is even my daughter. She was otherwise very, very happy. She would end up crying. See, your mother, she threw you out. And so these are the kind of this. Every time I came out tired and famished, and when you travel, women face more discrimination. No, right from hotel to traveling or everywhere, people take you for a. They just don't give you the kind of facility, the kind of things which men get even before, without having to ask for it. You have to constantly ask, no? And you come out tired and they say, "Ghum ke aa gaye." Now also I see so many people, when a working woman comes home, they think, "Haan, ghum ke aa gaye." So you had gone there for loitering or for just fun. While the man came, "Oh, he must be tired. I must give him 1 cup of coffee." No? So that is the kind of approach that we are seeing within the family. And also the stress, the moment you know that there are multiple expectations from you, you are not so relaxed. Even if you go out, you are going to face this thing that the guilt, and everyone guilt trips, no? Parents guilt trip, the children guilt trip, employers also, they say that, oh, you have divided loyalty, you are thinking about your family. If a man keeps his family's photograph on his table, everyone would praise him. Oh my God, such a loyal husband, such a caring father. You do same thing. You put your child and husband's photograph on near your table, and they would say, "Oh, she has no concentration on work. She's not giving 100% of herself for the serious job like this." So always it is a question of victim blaming, no? And that is why I think, see, what now also, like whenever corporate world people, they invite us, they are talking about microaggression. The phenomena which I talked about, glass ceiling and glass clipped and glass clipped and glass elevator, all these things which they are experiencing, and the microaggression, and also creating wedge between elderly women like us and the young women like you. So they would say that, oh, you elderly women, you are always you have to look after your parents, and you have to look after your in-laws, and you have to look after your sick people, and your children too, this thing. So while the young women, they are so liberated, no? And they would always keep, like, deliberately, they would keep meeting at 6 o'clock when you have to go home and look after, you have to relieve the caretaker who is looking after your elderly people. So I think this kind of approach, I think divide and rule approach, which is a very clever game of patriarchy. I think we should not be trapped. The only way we can thrive is through solidarity. No, I remember, because when I was, I had a child, it was basically the very positive environment of the colleagues, like who would say that, okay, if there is no crash, Vibhuti, no need to take leave. We need you are very much required. Bring the baby to the office, no? And we all will look after her. And once the child also gets acclimatized with the academic atmosphere, she never, sometimes I get 3-hour lecture of MPhil. All my mature students, they were also paying enough attention. She did not disturb us. So this kind of atmosphere where you have a very positive way of this thing, and acceptance that producing child itself is a great service to the nation, no? Because this child is going to be productive, to the contributing to the economy. That approach, if we have, then employers will treat the community like the way they are treating in East Europe. East Europe women are on strike. They are not producing babies. You go to Russia, white Russian women are not producing babies. It is the women who are in the Ukraine and all the other Soviet Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. There you see the birth rate is there. In actual Moscow, birth rate is negative. Women are just refusing. They say, we are not going to produce babies. Our men are not taking any responsibility. I also have my career option. I also want to do so many courses, and I also have so many hobbies, and with so many queues. And for milk, there is one queue. There is a bread, another queue. Third queue is for the doctor. Everywhere there are queues. Why should I have a baby? That is the way they are talking. So this should not happen, no? And see, wherever there is low literacy, you can impose your population control policy. But pro-natalist policies nowhere have worked. In Singapore, they created love boats in the universities, beautiful landscaping and orchid flowers, orchid gardens, so that these young boys and girls fall in love with each other. And then you withdraw abortion facility. So she will be forced to produce a baby. It did not work. Pro-educated women have mind of their own. Any kind of incentives or disincentive doesn't affect the decision. If she wants baby, she'll have. But because the state is saying you will not have it, no? So I think the employer's education is very important. That just because we have to give maternity benefit, we will not employ women. How can they even talk like that? Men report, so many men, they are alcoholics. They come to work when they are not doing anything. Some of them are drug addicts, and you never take any action against them. And when it comes to women, even when they are putting in their efficiency plus, you are constantly saying that they don't deserve a job, or they don't deserve promotion. This is it's a very patriarchal way of looking at it. And now it is more so. Your generation is facing more problem than my generation. Why? Because in at that time, still men had a pretense of benevolent patriarch. We are uplifting them. We are allowing our women. We are sending them to school. I'm allowing my wife to work. No, that way they would do. Now they know that you people are competitors because it's a question of share in the pie. Okay, all the youngest generation of women, they don't think that men are doing charity to them. They said it is my equal entitlement. And that creates tremendous male anxiety that they will miss the bus. So I think that creates far more currently with the kind of misogyny that we are seeing, not only in the movies, I think even in the regular, when you are traveling, where you are on the road, the kind of anxiety you see among men, mainly because women have become more confident about their life. They are educated. Some of them are getting good job. And that makes them, because power sharing, they don't want to do. So main question is that of a sharing of power. But the moment you talk of gender equality in praxis, then you have to share power. Otherwise, it remains only platitudes. No? So I think never feel apologetic. Whenever they say you have to give the rebuttal with all the good examples. So, and they are there, always there, right in your this thing. And small gesture of solidarity is it goes long way. When we see it in our work atmosphere, like if you have one colleague who has a sick father, so you adjust your timetable. They said, okay, Baba, if you are not able to come, don't cry. I will take your lecture. So this kind of small understanding and sensitivity, it goes a long way, and women stand by each other. No. Like recently, we saw even during the pandemic when online sexual harassment was happening, and the young woman, she confided to her middle-aged colleague, and when everyone was asked to log out, that middle-aged colleague did not log out. What she did was recorded what the boss was telling this young woman. It's such an empowering experience. The boss says that now I'll see, no, there is a lockdown. People are losing job. That is threatening her that if she doesn't give her sexual favor, then he would throw her out. And then everything that other colleague recorded it. And she had not logged out. And then she opened her video and told that now I'll see who will lose the job. The UNFP has also made a short film based on this, that even online harassment can be countered if there is solidarity. So never be alone. Generally, people are targeted. When the moment people know that you are alone, you are targeted. And the moment they know that you have some backing, then they think twice before witch hunting. No?
Yes.
Very well said. Yeah. Another question? Ravi?
Hi, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, it's a very personal question, actually. Ma'am, in my childhood, I have read somewhere that those mother who, मतलब जिनकी जो सॉरी लेट मी पुट माय वर्ड्स, जिन औरतों को उनकी माएँ प्यार नहीं करती, वो माएँ अपनी बेटियों को भी प्यार नहीं कर पाती है, मतलब वो फ्रीडम और वो रिस्पेक्ट नहीं दे पाती है. आई हैव रीड समवेयर, आई डोंट नो वेयर, इन अ न्यूज़पेपर और मैगजीन, वो छोटी छोटी मैगजीन्स वगैरह आती, पर आई हैव रीड समवेयर माय चाइल्डहुड. So whenever I saw my mother, I have seen this thing कि my mother's their love inclines to my brother is more than, because we are a 5 sister. But भाई का वो बहुत ज्यादा हो जाता है और हम फीमेल्स का बहुत ही डाउन हो जाता है. Like we have to fight for every fucking thing. तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि मे बी somehow somewhere ये हमारी साइकोलॉजी भी है, या ये हम वो एक कहता है ना कि एक अपोजिट जेंडर अट्रैक्शन, वो भी शायद मदर सन में भी वो रिफ्लेक्ट होता है और फादर डॉटर में भी वो रिफ्लेक्ट होता है.
नहीं, लेकिन कई
तो
जगह
मुझे कहीं ना कहीं लगता है कि
जी कही.
तो somehow I feel कि maybe that's also a reason कि we women carry a more patriarchy.
Everybody carries patriarchy, not only women or men. Otherwise, such misogynist men would not have been there. No, all those gory stories you are reading in the front page of newspaper won't be there. But all of us are carrier of patriarchy. We have a heavy baggage of patriarchy because there is the 5 pillars of patriarchy: family, kinship, network, religion, customs, tradition, the proverbs that they all, if you scratch a skin and your patriarchy would come out. So that is there. How to shed patriarchy is very important. We have also seen that when women face tremendous patriarchal discrimination, they see to it that their daughters not suffer. My mother was, I think, brighter than me, but she was married off after she appeared for SSC exam. All my life, she told me that I'm not destined for marriage. Person like man don't like intelligent women. Never think of marriage. Become a doctor. They even built a house so that if I become a doctor, means I can independently practice and I'll look after. And they said, in any case, you are so service oriented and caring. We will stay with you. Your brothers will get married. They'll. So what she could not, all the dreams which she had and she could not fulfill, she wanted me to fulfill. So that is also the reaction. So many times it happened. Mujhe wo karna nahi mila. I mean, that is there even among men. That I wanted to become a cricketer, I could not. But at least now I am working. I give you full freedom right from early childhood. I'll train you. So that kind of time. But there are variations in the responses. Even to the oppression, there is a variation in responses. Some people become extremely, they internalize misogyny and they internalize cruelty when they face brutalization. But at the same time, there are others who, because of the brutal experiences as children, they become extremely caring. In fact, so many people who are themselves victim of child abuse, they are now the spearheading or they are playing leadership role in street children's groups and they are running it so beautifully and sensitively. But because of their childhood trauma, they don't want any other child to face this trauma. So there are both types of reactions are there. Yeah.
That's to me always.
Yeah.
I always thought कि हाँ मैं भी इस तरह रहूं कि किसी और प्रॉब्लम ना हो.
सही बात है. वही सी आपका नजरिया अलग है ना. वही तो.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I think values also, and the values don't come only from one source, no? Values come from the books we read. If you have a nice teacher, like in my case, my teachers have played very important role in shaping my persona, getting rid of my complex with this. So that is also your kind of friends you have, kind of what you watch, you observe what's happening all around you. All of them, they shape your choices and your decisions in life.
But ma'am, sorry to say that, but comes to me, I never got a good teacher because where I studied in a government job, most of the men was there and female was like 120 student and almost 1,000 of boys. So male oriented college. So there are a lot of things we are facing from the teachers. So we had to fight every day that please do not touch us, please maintain a distance. This happened to me like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and our entire like 5 years. Like we have to always defensive mode.
Okay. Yeah, I think. So that's why I think we have
government college. Yeah.
Correct. At a very young age, like we have to change the mindset of people. And also, if not with that, at least with the law, like corporal punishment or discriminatory behavior in the college. If there are strict ways of dealing with that, then people who are this kind of behavior can be controlled by force, not voluntarily, but they know that the punishment would be heavy. Like there are so many teachers who were earlier beating their children, and they still believe that if you beat the child will be disciplined. And we are against corporal punishment. You can't do that. It's a crime. No teacher can. So there are certain state governments which are extremely strict about against corporal punishment. So even those who believe in violent behavior, they are curbed because that can become this thing. Or discrimination against Dalit children, Anti-Atrocity Act, the moment you apply. So at least that is being used by the people. No? So those who don't voluntarily behave nicely, they can be controlled by their misbehavior can be controlled by the law. state is there. So, that's why policies and legislation become very important. Even anti-ragging, now wherever the anti-ragging committees are active, they have been able to curb it. We're very strict. It's a non-negotiable. In so many states, it's non-negotiable. Where they are lax, then ragging happens.
Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much, Ravi Deepti, for sharing with us. Swati, maybe we take that as the last question, if you want to go ahead.
Mine was more of a commentary
Yeah.
to what other participants asked. That as ma'am said that we don't have to be apologetic about this because um uh, fortunately for us, we live in an age where we are aware of our rights, we are aware of the helplines, and we are aware of the laws that we have. And we are not in an age where our parents, where our mothers were forced to do things because they did not have avenues. Nobody would even if they did not want to do something, there would be nobody to back them. They could not go back to their parents or did not have other means. So now that we have, at least we should not internalize that guilt that I have to do everything because that is what is expected of me.
Yeah.
So at least we, for some time, maybe for our generation, because we are the transitional, between modernity and tradition and this digital age, we are in between that. So we will have to brave it up, for ourselves and for the generations to come. And then slowly, men have begun to, my brothers, I have seen in my family, my father, who would not do a single thing 20 years back. And now, he helps my mother. And now that, he has become a father. So maybe when he was a husband, he was not that great on helping a husband. But now when he saw me growing up and growing, and he wanted everything for his daughter, then things have changed. And now, he is not the same husband who he was earlier. So people evolve, and many men also are not aware. They are also a victim of the same patriarchy. They sometimes are not aware of what wrong they are doing because they have seen those things happening around. So it takes for us, we also help them, and people in our family see things. So we will evolve, it won't come at a gunpoint. Your laws can, obviously, slowly laws will, at least check, prevent crimes, but this mindset change. And I think for Ravi Deep, I would like to say that, at least you are in a digital age. If you did not have teachers, or did not have family members who helped you, at least you have social media, you have people you can access through social media, you have motivational videos, you have things you can read. So at least we are better off than the previous generation. So we have to all brave it up, and that have that solidarity, and that know that we will not be like our mothers. That is all what I wanted to say.
That's what even the girls in my women's university would say. We have seen so much degradation of our mother, ma'am. We don't want to be. First thing, the moment they join college, they want earn and learn programs. So 4 hours of lectures are there. Other 4 hours we will work and all. We will save money, work for 10 years, have our own small little house so that nobody can throw out. Because every time there was a fight in our house, they would say, just leave the house. No, they would threaten my mother. We don't want that to happen to us. And so many women now in the cities, at least we see that they have heard enough of stories of dowry harassment and domestic violence. So many of them, they say that no, we want to be on our own. Self-dependence is very important, which is not only economic independence, economic dependence plus the moral courage to not to put up with any kind of undignified behavior from anybody, from colleague or from husband or from boyfriend or from neighbor. So that I think, and they create their own community, which is also very important. Now I see all these young women's clusters, 8, 10 of them, working women, exchanging pleasantries, providing support to each other at the time of illness or at the time of crisis, or they just want to unwind because the jobs have become so stressful these days. So I think this kind of a communities which they are creating, they can be digital community as well as in-person meeting. I think that also now they are starting. But even digital communities are very supportive of each other, no? Yeah. So, yeah. Pallavi Beriji, yeah. Hello? Would you like to speak? You have raised hand, Pallavi.
Vibhuti, could you try saying something? We can't hear you.
She is unmuted. I am trying. She's trying.
Okay. Megha ji, if you would like to go.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Hello.
My question is,
Yeah.
yes, thank you, ma'am. My question is, ma'am, how can deal with ignorance on the workplace because of we can't able to do flattering, because sometimes law can't help you, but you face these types of issue.
Which
I
issue?
think which issue, like ignorance. We read about it. Yes, because you deserve work, you deserve the position, but the people can't provide you because of you are not this types of or that types of attitude what they want to expect with you, like politics, like gossiping, like parties, and you try to maintain your individuality.
Yeah, you try to maintain your individuality, but
Yes,
you need to come in.
yes, but they try to manipulate you. How? Try to ignore. Try to in when you are in community, when it's a matter about that work distribution. So they will try to ignore you. So ignorance on the workplace is the most prominent problem for women, because we can't share our feeling to others, because if you share with your actual feeling, so people ask आपके साथ ही ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है.
सही बात, victim blaming.
yes. So मुझे लगता है कि इसमें कानून भी आपकी मदद नहीं कर सकता है, बट
कानून कर सकता है. बहुत सारी औरतों ने इक्वल रेम्युनरेशन एक्ट की यूज किया है फॉर दिस काइंड ऑफ बिहेवियर, विच इज कॉल्ड ERA. किरण बेदी से लेके सभी ने किया है. पुलिस में भी कर रहे हैं, डिप्लोमेटिक इसमें कर रहे हैं, IAS ऑफिसर्स कर रहे हैं, नेवी, आर्मी, Fortune 500 companies, public sector enterprises, they all have been using ERA. Equal Remuneration Act, which is not only about remuneration, it is equal treatment, equal opportunity, and equal reward. And so sometimes they have out of court settlement, or sometimes they go to the court and win the case. As I told you, the example of Audrey Ribeiro. Audrey Ribeiro went to the court. She filed public interest litigation case, and because of a public litigation case, the act became extremely popular nationwide, because she was constantly invited to give public speeches, and she was collecting signature in support of her petition, and it became a wave. It became such a big movement that so many women from the public sector, they started asking for using this law. So ऐसी behavior, discrimination and harassment are two sides of the same coin. एक ही सिक्के की दो बाजू है, आपसे भेदभाव करना और आपको सताना. सता के वो भेदभाव करते हैं और भेदभाव के जरिए आपको सताते हैं, ऐसा है. तो देयर इज अ लॉ, या वी कैन यूज इट. वर्कप्लेस इक्वालिटी के जो लॉ है, ILO का डिसेंट वर्क का जो लॉ है, इंडिया हैज साइंड द चार्टर फॉर डिसेंट वर्क. वर्कप्लेस वायलेंस का लॉ 2019 का है. You can't use verbal, psychological, emotional or physical or sexual violence is at the workplace. वो भी है. गारमेंट इंडस्ट्री की लड़कियां यूज कर रही हैं. शुगर केन वर्कर्स आर यूजिंग दिस लॉ एंड दे हैव गॉन टू द कोर्ट, एंड इसकी वजह से काफी बड़ी तब्दीली भी आई है. गवर्नमेंट ने GR भी निकाला है कि एम्प्लॉयर्स के थ्रू दिस टाइप ऑफ दिस थिंग कैन नॉट बी डन. नो.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Some more detail, ma'am, about law.
हाँ, अब इक्वल रेम्युनरेशन एक्ट है ना, वो भी है.
Okay.
और मैं आई थिंक नेक्स्ट इसमें भी उसको वो इंक्लूड कर लूंगी. इक्वल रेम्युनरेशन एक्ट 1976, एंड जो जितने भी लेबर लॉज हैं हमारे देश के जो महिलाओं के बारे में, उसको भी हम ले सकते हैं. लॉ इज अ वन वे ऑफ dealing with the issue. Second one is writing about it. Third one is a women development cell. Now every employer has to provide a space. कोई लोग उसे ICC कहते हैं, इंटरनल कंप्लेंट्स कमेटी कहते हैं, जो सिर्फ सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट के लिए होती है, लेकिन बहुत सारी जगह में दे कॉल इट विमेन डेवलपमेंट सेल. तो इसमें जेंडर इश्यूज की चर्चा भी होती है, और यदि कोई ऐसा केस हो गया तो दे ऑल्सो ऑर्गेनाइज internal inquiry is organized. So they are creating spaces within the workplace where these issues can be discussed. Plus जो function करते हैं 8th March का function International Women's Day, you specially choose those themes कि जो आपको बहुत ही सताती है वर्क प्लेस पे, you choose those themes और let there be open discussion on it, खुले चर्चा करना.
मैं आपको अगर हमारे पास समय है तो मैं बड़ी मतलब ब्रीफ में बताती हूँ आपको एक सिनेरियो. एक्चुअली जिस वुमेन की बात मैंने की वो मैं ही हूँ, लेकिन मैं आपको बताती हूँ, मैं जहाँ पर काम कर रही थी वहां मैं 1-1.5 साल से काम कर रही थी, और हमारे रिश्ते इसलिए अच्छे थे क्योंकि आप उनके साथ चल रहे थे. साथ इन द सेंस कि आपने एक कर्टसी मेंटेन की और आपको लगता है आपको करना चाहिए. पर जब आपकी बात हो गई कि जहां पर आपको चुप रहना चाहिए, किसी के अगेंस्ट इसलिए नहीं बोलना चाहिए कि वो सही है, लेकिन अगर कोई गलत है तो आप सिर्फ उनको फेवर करने के लिए उनको सही नहीं बोल सकते हो, तो आपको चुप रहना समझदारी था. और जो ये मैम आइडियल की बात करते हैं, वुमेन को प्रोटेक्शंस की बात करते हैं, गलत नहीं करते हैं, ये चीजें उन्हीं के साथ हो रही है जो वुमेन्स डे को सेलिब्रेट कर रहे हैं. और ये कंडीशन ये मैं क्यों रखना चाह रही हूँ मैम कि जो लोग मतलब पोडियम पर होते हैं, जो फोरम पर होते हैं, वही अगेंस्ट होते हैं इसके. जब उनकी इंडिविजुअलिटी की बात आती है, उन पर चीजें आती है, वो बायस्ड नहीं हो सकते हैं, वो बायस्ड नहीं हो पाते, मतलब बायस्ड हो जाते हैं, वो ट्रू नहीं हो पाते हैं विथ हिज सोल और हर सोल, वो नहीं हो पाते हैं. तो ये और मुझे लगता है मैम कि कोई भी जितनी भी चीजें हम लोग पढ़े, एकेडमिशियन स्पेशली, वो खुद हैं, एजुकेटेड है. अगर एजुकेटेड लोग ऐसा करेंगे तो फिर हम ट्रस्ट किस पर करेंगे?
नहीं, लेकिन इसीलिए जो पावर की भाषा समझते हैं उनको तो पावर से ही जवाब देना पड़ेगा ना. उनको या तो कानून से, या तो नोटिस देके, या तो कलेक्टिवली ये करना पड़ेगा. जो लोग चर्चा की भाषा नहीं समझते, those who don't believe in a decent exchange of ideas, उनके साथ तो you will also have to use the language of power only, no?
Thank you so much, ma'am.
नोटिस देना, लीगल नोटिस देते हैं ना बहने.
Yes.
तो कई दफे जो लातों की भूत बातों से नहीं मानते, तो उनको फिर वो वैसे ही नोटिस देके फिर चक्कर काटते ही रहे पुलिस के और कोर्ट के.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, Meera-ji, for that question. Ma'am, view of the time, perhaps we can wrap up for today. Any closing remarks?
I'm just kidding. So I think closing remarks, what emerged from today's discussion, especially global perspective and the overview which Professor Roxana gave, and this thing of an Indian scenario over last 80 to 100 years, especially after the Second World War. That what we see, that we have seen often dynamic leaders, women dynamic leaders, who are galvanizing women and men to get involved, claim their rights, strengthen their communities, and protect this planet. Women's participation is fundamental to democratic governance that has been accepted by all progressive regimes. Not only is diversity beneficial in itself, but when women are highly qualified, more responsible, and less corruptible than men, this causes efficiency gains to emerge. So, देश को भी उसका फायदा होता है. The country also benefits if you have a non-corrupt leader, and if they are in a collective. Not one or two. The result is higher quality of institutions and organizations, a positive effect on economic outcomes and performance, and also a national policy agenda can be fulfilled. What we saw in Sustainable Development Goal number 5, which includes the target to ensure women's full and effective participation, equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision making in politics, in economy, and in public life. I think this is what also it's a reiteration of what Beijing Platform for Action in 1995 had adopted, the changing of the historical underrepresentation of women in decision making, for which what we needed is a order to strengthen democracy and promote proper functioning. So in order to fulfill this goal of full inclusion of women in decision-making in public life, CEDAW also came up with the temporary special measures that immediately what can your country achieve, no? And after 45 years also, what we see that TSMs are institutionalized all over the world, but that is not enough. As our first previous in the day one, Comrade Amarjit told us, no, that intersectional approaches are important to bring more women, and also those underrepresented groups, they should also be empowered. So once we achieve everything and we forget the rest, that should not happen. Even empowered woman always empowers other women. So regular publication of gender disaggregated data on a decision makers in industry, state structures, educational institutions, political bodies is also very, very important. And we also need to demand accountability, because that also emerged that accountability needs to be demanded from the power structures, whether it is a government or political bodies or educational institutions or employers. So that social accountability, that whatever you are promising, are you practicing or not, that we need to create those systems and democratic platforms. That's very important, along with bringing changes within, shedding our own patriarchal baggages and establishing solidarity with the fellow women. That's what even Dr. Roxana said, that that's what is the first generation of feminism that talks about the global solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for everything that you've spoken to us about today. With that, as we come to an end of day 3 of YWLPPF, Young Women Leaders in Public Policy Fellowship, a 2-month online immersive introductory leadership certificate training program, I, Tripta Behra, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI Gender Impact Studies Center, GISC. We are extremely grateful to our experts for day 3 of this course, Professor Vibhuti Patel and Professor Roxana Marinescu. Thank you so much for taking out valuable time and giving an opportunity to the participants to learn from this online certificate program. We also thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We are grateful if you are watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you all a very good evening. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.